Welcome back to the Patlon Codes YouTube channel. Today we're going to be looking at an introduction to Python libraries for creating Excel files. And we'll primarily be looking at the Pandas library, but we'll also be looking at two other libraries that use the Openpyxl and xlsxWriter library. We'll also use the scikit-learn library for some sample data that we'll be going through for the demonstration purposes here. All the code that I'll use in this tutorial will be linked in the description below, and documentation also, especially for Openpyxl and xlsxWriter, where they have a lot of good examples on their documentation sites, will also be linked in the description below. Pandas is much more widely used, so the documentation should be quite familiar. So we'll first be looking at installing these libraries if necessary. I'll be working out Google Colab. We'll load and display some data using Pandas, and then save Excel files with Pandas and XlsxWriter. And then finally, we'll look at modifying an existing Excel file with the Openpyxl library, and how it's different, particularly from XlsxWriter in that regard. So these three libraries are the ones we'll be using for creating Excel files. I'll kind of assume there's a bit of familiarity with the Pandas library already if you're watching this tutorial. But I'll introduce Openpyxl, which is used by Pandas as XlsxWriter, and we'll also look at scikit-learn. So now I'm looking up Google Colab, which is what I'm going to use for this tutorial. That way there's no need for any installation or environment setup. If you're reproducing this, you can use the same tool I'm using. All you need to use Colab is just a Gmail account or Google account, and you'll be all set to get started. All right, so here I've set up the steps I'm going to be doing. First off, we're going to want to import the libraries we need, Pandas and Openpyxl and XlsxWriter, which may or may not be installed. We'll find out. So I may have to do a pip install. And from scikit-learn, I'm just going to get the sample data set I'm using, which is Fish's Iris data set. Yeah, so I will have to do the pip install XlsxWriter. And yep, so now we're all set. We have XlsxWriter. We can start looking. We'll start looking at the Fish's Iris dataset, which is the one we're just going to use. I figured it was easier to set up a dataset that anyone can get and use themselves. So here's a little snippet that you will be familiar with if you use scikit-learn before. We're converting this from an array to a Pandas data frame. And we'll also want the data, and we'll also want the feature names, which is the name of the columns. As with any Jupyter notebook, Colab gives you these helpful hints for what you're going to type next when you're using this. I'll just show you what it looks like in its natural form here as an array, and then what it looks like as a data frame, just using just showing the first 5 rows with head, or you can change that to whatever, but the default is 5. And so there's what the array looks like. And you can see there's the target is the groups of the different breeds of plants, if you're familiar with Fisher's data set. And because we're making an Excel file here, it's going to be just much easier to work with the data frame format. So below you'll see the first 5 rows of the data frame I've created from that. Okay, so let's start looking at creating an Excel file that just shows this data frame. And the basic way to do this, the easiest way to do this, if you just want to give a user Excel file, is to use the toXL method. Again, Jupyter tells you all the arguments. For something like this, it will also be very easy to just here in Colab we can generate with AI, or if you're using ChatGPT, it'll give you very good instructions for options you might want to create a basic Excel file. And again, I want that index removed on the left-hand side, so I pretty much always set index equals false, so you don't have that index I was pointing out. And I'm just using Excel Library here. And you see you don't really have any customization of format. You're just putting that data frame into an Excel file, basically. And so now let's look at how we can use the XlsxWriter to do some additional formatting. XlsxWriter, you can only create original Excel files with XlsxWriter, so you can't modify existing ones, but there's a lot of very intuitive customization you can do with XlsxWriter. I'm also going to add, just for the benefit of the outputted data frame, I'm going to add in the species column, which were, Virginica, and the three names are escaping me, but I'll print them out before we look at it, just so if someone was actually using this Excel file, the target names would give them a better idea of what they're looking at here, rather than the groupings of 1, 2, and 3. So the species name there, Virginica, for example, and Setosa is another one. And then if I'm looking at the one in the middle, it's versicolor. So those are the 3 different species. The names were escaping me. But yeah, I think that would be more useful. So we're adding in the species column. Now let's get started on actually creating the new Excel file. And we're going to just give a really basic example of how you might use conditional formatting. If you're familiar with conditional formatting in Excel, here's how you might do it. Here's one way you can do it in Python when you're creating an Excel file. So with pd.xlsxWriter, we'll make the name of the Excel file explicitly. And we'll specify the engine equals XlsxWriter. Now, you could do this entirely in XlsxWriter instead of doing it in Pandas. I prefer to do it in Pandas, and create this writer object. And I'll create a workbook and worksheet object too that we'll be working with. So we'll start by doing basically what we did earlier with the toXL, putting this data frame that's just called DF into this Excel workbook. And you can specify the sheet name, which is what I'm going to do, or it would default just as Excel does to sheet 1 if you didn't. And also going to make sure I remove that pesky index we were talking about earlier. Yeah, now we're going to access the workbook and worksheet objects that I was mentioning earlier. So you don't need to call it workbook. You could call it WB. And again, you don't need to, you can call it whatever you want, but I think workbook or at least makes sense. If you're looking back in code later, it would make sense to call it something where you know what it refers to right away. And the same with worksheet. Again, explicitly, I'm using that iris data sheet that I defined. Now, gonna define some kind of a range here for the sepal length column, which is column A. I'm using F strings here. And I'm going to use the length of the data frame plus 1, which will give me, since Python's 0 indexed, I'll want to add 1 to it to get the right row for Excel. And I'll just copy this and do the same thing in the C column, call it petal length instead. And now I'm going to be looking at doing the actual green format here, and red format is what I'm going to call them. And you can do a lot of options here. I'm just going to do basically, you could end up changing the font and several other things if you chose to do that. I'm just going to do the basic background color here, but you could keep on going on with your customization. And I'll do exactly the same for the red format. Just have to, change it. Yeah, like again, I'm mentioning here, you could change the font, and there's a lot of different options. I could set the font to Calibri, and on and on and on. I'm just going to keep this example pretty simple. I'm going to do a red format in the one below. So we're going to apply conditional formatting to column A, and we could make this just based on a little bit. I know just preliminarily looking at the data that if it's greater than 5, just for some reason, maybe a user will want to highlight it under a condition. There's a lot more you can do with conditional formatting in Excel, and by extension, anything you can do in Excel with conditional formatting, by and large, you can do in XlsxWriter with conditional formatting. And here I'm just setting the criteria, and I'm going to spell out what format we're going to use. We're going to use that green format. We're going to do it for any rows in that data range sepal length we spelled out. That will be greater than 5, and I'm just going to copy and paste, do the same thing with petal length. Why don't we make this one 3.5, because they tend to be a little bit smaller. I'll just put that comment in there for readability down the line. So we're using red format there, and let's run this. And I see, there's a mistake there. I needed that to be C. And so here we see the conditional format in action in column A. You see the green highlighting for anything that's above 5. And here, anything that's above, 3.8. 3.5 was what we ended up going with. All right, so that's our existing one. Now let's just give a quick example in Openpyxl of how you might modify that existing workbook, which you can't do in xlsxWriter. So here I'm just going to actually use Openpyxl explicitly, not using pandas. I'm going to use again, got the load workbook going. I have to spell out the name of the file that I've already created, that name. And I'm also going to have to make a worksheet object, different syntax to xlsxWriter. But I want to make sure I'm getting that same sheet. And now I'm going to apply a new format to the existing workbook. So I'm not undoing any of the conditional formatting or whatever existed in that Excel file before. I'm just going to make a tweak. And in this example, I'm just going to change the color of the top row to, blue. And I'm going to loop through that first row and change every cell in it to have that format. Again, I'm using that worksheet operator in that worksheet object in Openpyxl here to do that. And then the last thing I need to do is just save that change. So it's pretty basic change. Want to make sure I got the right workbook. I think let's look at what I've done here. I think I've spelled something wrong. Yeah, I spelled it wrong in both places. So yeah, rerun. Okay, it's always good to, the log is very intuitive for telling you these things. And here you see I've got the blue text, and that was basically all I was looking to do. So a basic example of editing an existing .xlsx file using the Openpyxl library. So thanks for following along with this coding tutorial. Again, all the code used is linked in the description below, which is on my GitHub page, and you'll also find links to documentation for xlsxWriter, pandas, and Openpyxl, so you can follow along with that. Okay, thanks for watching.